I'm just somebody that doesn't like being lied to. It does feel like this was the plan all along. Why didn't you just say that up front? It's not, you didn't have to lie to the people to get your way.
Camilla had always lived in the shadows, her ambition quietly masked behind calm composure. But when her hidden estate was finally searched, even the most loyal guards were left speechless. "I can't believe this is here," one whispered, staring at the secrets uncovered. Inside, diaries and plans revealed a side of her no one had ever imagined. Schemes so bold, they threatened the very heart of the monarchy. Every room, every document hinted at a mind plotting decades ahead. What she truly wanted, and how far she would go to achieve it, stunned everyone who stepped inside. Camilla's early relationship with Charles. The polo field stretched green and endless under the summer sun of 1970 when Camilla Shand first crossed paths with Prince Charles. She stood among the spectators, confident and relaxed in a way that immediately caught his attention. Unlike other women who became nervous and tongue-tied in his presence, Camilla approached him with easy charm and a mischievous glint in her eye. Their conversation flowed naturally, as though they had known each other for years rather than minutes. Within weeks, they became inseparable. Charles found himself counting the hours until he could see her again. She possessed a warmth and earthiness that made him feel truly seen for the first time in his life. While other women treated him like a prize to be won, Camilla treated him like a man worth knowing. They rode horses together through the countryside, shared quiet dinners away from prying eyes, and talked late into the night about everything and nothing. Charles discovered in Camilla a kindred spirit who understood his loneliness and the burden of his position. She listened without judgment when he spoke of his frustrations with royal protocol and his fears about the future. In her presence, the weight he carried daily seemed lighter. She made him laugh with her sharp wit and honest observations about the absurdity of court life. For the first time, Charles felt he could breathe, but their happiness existed in a fragile bubble that reality was destined to burst. The palace had very clear requirements for the future queen consort. She needed to be from impeccable aristocratic stock, yes, but more importantly, she needed to be young and completely free from romantic entanglements. Camilla had a past that included previous relationships, and at 23 she was considered too worldly for the role. The whispers from courtiers and advisors grew louder with each passing week. Charles was summoned for serious conversations about duty and appropriateness. His family made their position unmistakably clear. When naval obligations called him away in 1972, he left with a heavy heart and unspoken promises. Camilla waited, writing letters that expressed her feelings with careful restraint. But the silence from Charles spoke volumes about the impossible position he found himself in, caught between desire and obligation. The announcement of Camilla's engagement to Andrew Parker Bowles came like a thunderclap. She married him in July of 1973, wearing a smile that looked genuine to most observers. But inside, Camilla felt a door closing on a dream she had barely allowed herself to imagine. She told herself that loving Andrew was enough, that she could build a good life with him, yet some part of her remained tethered to the prince who had let her slip away. Years turned into a decade. Charles married Lady Diana Spencer in July of 1981, and the world went mad with joy. Diana was everything Camilla was not: young, beautiful in a conventional way, shy, and blessed with an almost supernatural ability to charm cameras. The wedding was a spectacle of unprecedented magnificence, watched by 750 million people worldwide. Camilla attended as a guest, her face carefully neutral. Watching Diana glide through her new role, Camilla experienced complex emotions she rarely allowed herself to examine too closely. The younger woman seemed luminous, yet fragile, like a candle flame in a drafty room. Diana wore the tiaras and received the adulation, but Camilla recognized something crucial that others missed. The marriage was already showing cracks that would eventually become chasms. When Charles reached out to rekindle their connection, Camilla responded without hesitation. Their meetings became more frequent, conducted with elaborate secrecy and careful planning. She became his confidant again, the person he trusted with his deepest thoughts and darkest moments. While Diana sparkled in public, Camilla provided something more enduring in private: genuine understanding and unconditional acceptance. Living in Diana's shadow required a particular kind of strength. Camilla knew she would never receive public sympathy or understanding. She would always be cast as the villain in a story where Diana played the wronged heroine. But Camilla possessed something that sustained her through years of criticism and condemnation: absolute certainty about Charles's feelings and her own patience. She could wait. She had waited before, and she would wait again, for as long as necessary. But she knew that waiting was not enough, and she needed to change plans. The marriage of convenience. Camilla walked down the aisle to marry Andrew Parker Bowles in July of 1973, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hands. The guard's chapel was filled with distinguished guests, and everyone agreed she looked radiant. But as she spoke her vows, a small voice whispered in the back of her mind about the man who was not there. Andrew was handsome, charming, and from an excellent family. He would make a fine husband by every measure society valued. "I do love him," Camilla insisted to her sister after the ceremony. "Perhaps not in the wild, passionate way novels describe, but real life isn't like that anyway." She meant those words when she said them. Andrew made her laugh, treated her well, and wanted the same comfortable country life she envisioned. If her heart occasionally wandered to thoughts of a certain prince, she pushed those feelings down where they could not trouble her. The early years brought two children, Tom in 1974 and Laura in 1978. Camilla threw herself into motherhood with genuine devotion. She organized their days, read them bedtime stories, and created a warm home filled with love and laughter. Yet something fundamental remained missing from her marriage. Andrew had his own pursuits and his own secrets, including rumored affairs that Camilla chose not to examine too closely. "We have an understanding," she explained to a close friend over tea one afternoon. "We care for each other, but we're not each other's great passion." It was an arrangement that worked for a time, built on mutual respect and shared responsibilities rather than burning devotion. They attended social events together, maintained appearances, and gave their children a stable upbringing. On the surface, everything appeared perfectly acceptable. But Charles's marriage to Diana was unraveling in spectacular fashion, and the cracks were becoming impossible to hide. When Charles called Camilla in the early 1980s, desperate for someone who understood him, she answered without hesitation. Their conversations grew longer and more intimate. They began meeting secretly, stealing hours together when they could manage it. Camilla found herself pulled back into an orbit she thought she had escaped. "You're the only person who knows the real me," Charles told her during one of their clandestine encounters. "Diana sees only what she wants to see, but you've always seen the truth." Those words fed something deep in Camilla's soul. She had always believed she understood Charles better than anyone else could. Now he was confirming what she had known all along. Her marriage to Andrew became increasingly hollow as the 1980s progressed. They lived separate lives under the same roof, keeping up appearances for the sake of their children and their social position. Andrew had his interests, and Camilla had hers. The pretense exhausted her, but she maintained it with practiced skill. She had learned patience over the years, learned to wait for the right moment, rather than forcing outcomes. "Things have a way of working themselves out," Camilla reflected privately as she watched her children grow. "Sometimes the path that seems closed opens again when you least expect it." She was thinking about Charles, about the connection that had never truly ended despite marriages and years and impossible circumstances. She could feel something shifting, some cosmic realignment that might finally work in her favor. The divorce from Andrew was finalized in 1995, ending a marriage that had been more friendship than romance for years. The announcement was handled quietly, without drama or public acrimony. They remained cordial, committed to co-parenting their nearly grown children. Society whispered about the split, but Camilla held her head high. She knew what people said about her, knew her reputation had suffered from her relationship with Charles. "I've made my choices," she told her reflection one evening after the divorce papers were signed. "I've waited this long. I can wait a little longer." There was steel in her voice, a determination born from decades of loving a man she could not openly claim. Diana still held the title, still captured hearts worldwide, but Camilla possessed something more valuable: Charles's unwavering devotion and the absolute certainty that time was on her side. She had played the long game, and she believed she would ultimately win. Despite being separated for a very long time, fate gave them another chance, and Camilla was very quick to act. Charles's divorce and Diana's death. The announcement of Charles and Diana's separation in December of 1992 sent shockwaves through Britain and beyond. The fairy tale marriage had officially become a nightmare, and the entire world watched as the royal family's dirty laundry was aired in the most public way imaginable. Camilla sat in her country home reading the newspapers with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She knew her name would inevitably be dragged through the mud as the other woman, the villain in a story that had captivated millions. "They'll never forgive me," Camilla said quietly to a trusted friend. "I'll always be the one who destroyed their princess." The tabloids printed unflattering photographs of her, comparing her appearance cruelly to Diana's glowing beauty. Every article painted her as the scheming seductress who had stolen the prince from his innocent bride. Camilla learned to avoid mirrors on days when the attacks felt particularly vicious. She stayed out of London, kept her head down, and waited for the storm to pass. Diana, meanwhile, was transforming herself into something far more powerful than a discarded wife. She embraced humanitarian causes with genuine passion, traveling to war zones and holding the hands of the sick and dying. Her interview with Martin Bashir in 1995 became legendary, watched by 23 million people in Britain alone. When Diana spoke those famous words about 3 people in her marriage, Camilla felt the weight of public hatred intensify. "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," Diana had said with devastating simplicity. The entire world knew exactly who the third person was. Camilla became the most hated woman in Britain overnight. She received threatening letters, faced protesters outside her home, and could not appear in public without facing hostility. Through it all, she maintained a dignified silence, refusing to defend herself or explain her side of the story. Charles's divorce was finalized in August of 1996, ending 15 years of marriage that had brought both joy and profound misery. He was free now, technically, but the shadow of Diana loomed larger than ever. She had won the public's heart so completely that any woman who tried to take her place would face insurmountable opposition. Camilla understood this reality with painful clarity. She and Charles continued their relationship in extreme secrecy, meeting in private homes and avoiding any situation that might result in photographs. "We just need to be patient," Charles assured her during their quiet moments together. "Eventually people will understand." Camilla wanted to believe him, but she had her doubts. Diana's star burned too brightly. The princess had mastered the art of public sympathy, and Camilla knew she could never compete on that battlefield. So she remained in the shadows, the hidden girlfriend, the relationship that dare not speak its name. Then came the night that changed everything. August 31st, 1997. Camilla was at home when the phone rang in the early morning hours with news that seemed impossible to comprehend. Diana had been in a terrible car accident in Paris. She was dead at 36 years old, killed in a tunnel while fleeing photographers. The world stopped turning for a moment as the news spread across continents. "Oh God, those poor boys," Camilla whispered, thinking immediately of William and Harry. Whatever complicated feelings she had about Diana, her heart broke for the 2 young princes who had just lost their mother. She called Charles, finding him devastated and lost. He had to travel to Paris to bring Diana's body home, had to face his grieving sons, had to navigate an impossible situation with grace he did not feel. Camilla stayed away from the funeral, knowing her presence would be seen as an obscene intrusion. She watched on television as 1 billion people around the world mourned the people's princess. The outpouring of grief was unlike anything modern history had witnessed. Flowers piled up outside the palaces, grown men wept openly in the streets, and the nation demanded answers about how this tragedy had happened. "Everything has changed now," Camilla reflected in the weeks that followed. The path forward just became infinitely more complicated. She understood that Diana's death had transformed her from beloved princess into eternal saint. Any woman who tried to fill her shoes would be crucified. But Camilla also recognized an opportunity hidden within the tragedy. With time and careful strategy, the public's rage would eventually soften. She would need to be patient, to move slowly and deliberately, to prove herself worthy through actions rather than words. She had waited decades already. She could wait a little longer. Despite being married to Charles, what awaited her wasn't the life she dreamt of. Marriage to Charles and life in Diana's shadow. The wedding took place on April 9, 2005, in a small civil ceremony at Windsor Guildhall. After 35 years of waiting, loving, and enduring public hatred, Camilla Parker Bowles became the Duchess of Cornwall. She wore a pale blue coat and a wide-brimmed hat, her smile tentative as cameras captured every moment. Charles squeezed her hand during the ceremony, a gesture of reassurance and solidarity. They had finally done it, made their relationship legal and official, yet the celebration felt muted and cautious. "I never thought this day would come," Camilla confided to her sister that evening. "After everything we've been through, I almost can't believe it's real." But real it was, though the path to acceptance remained steep and treacherous. The public had not forgiven her for her role in Charles's failed marriage. Protesters held signs with Diana's image outside the ceremony. Polls showed that most Britons did not want Camilla to become queen when Charles ascended the throne. She had won the man, but lost the people. Diana's ghost haunted every room Camilla entered. Comparisons were inevitable and always unfavorable. Where Diana had been graceful and slender, Camilla was sturdy and practical. Where Diana had worn couture gowns with effortless elegance, Camilla preferred comfortable tweeds and sensible shoes. The media dissected every public appearance, every outfit choice, every facial expression. Camilla felt the weight of those comparisons crushing her spirit day after day. "I'll never be her," Camilla wrote in her private diary one sleepless night. "They want me to be a pale imitation of someone I could never become. But perhaps that's not what I should aim for anyway." She sat at her writing desk in her private estate, the old manor house that had become her sanctuary from the relentless scrutiny. Here, surrounded by familiar furniture and beloved dogs, she could finally breathe and think without performance or pretense. Her estate became her refuge, a place where she could escape the suffocating expectations and constant criticism. The gardens sprawled across acres of countryside, offering peace and solitude when the pressure became unbearable. Camilla walked those paths daily, sometimes for hours, processing her thoughts and planning her strategy. She had not come this far to be dismissed as merely Charles's second wife, the unfortunate replacement for a beloved icon. "Power isn't always loud," she reflected in another diary entry. "Sometimes the most effective power is the kind nobody sees coming." Camilla had spent decades observing the royal family from both inside and outside. She understood how influence flowed through ancient institutions, how whispers in the right ears could shift policies and perceptions. She knew Charles better than anyone alive, understood his weaknesses and his needs. That knowledge was her greatest asset. She began positioning herself carefully within the family structure. Camilla attended charity events and royal functions, always dignified, always appropriate. She chose causes that wouldn't compete with Diana's legacy, but would establish her own identity. She focused on literacy programs, animal welfare, and supporting victims of domestic violence. The work was genuine, but it was also strategic. Every appearance was calculated to soften her image and demonstrate her value. "I see what you're doing," Charles told her one evening as they reviewed her schedule. "You're winning them over slowly, one person at a time." Camilla smiled slightly, neither confirming nor denying his observation. She had learned patience through years of waiting and heartbreak. She applied that same patience now to her long-term goals. Rushing would only invite disaster. Slow and steady was the only path forward. Her private writings revealed thoughts she would never speak aloud. She wrote about the injustice of being vilified for loving someone, about the pain of watching Diana be canonized while she was demonized. But she also wrote about her determination to prove herself worthy, to show that she deserved her place beside Charles. Her ambition had grown sharper over the years, honed by rejection and public scorn into something harder and more focused. When Charles becomes king, everything will change, Camilla wrote on a cold winter night, her hand moving rapidly across the page. The rules will be rewritten. The past will matter less than the present. I will have earned my position through decades of dedication and sacrifice. They will have no choice but to accept me. There was steel in those words, a ruthless clarity about what she wanted and how she intended to achieve it. She studied the monarchy's history, particularly the stories of queens and consorts who had transformed their positions through intelligence and persistence. She noted how public opinion could shift over time, how scandals faded and new narratives emerged. Diana would always be remembered, always beloved, but memories soften and people move forward. Camilla understood that her victory would not come through competing with Diana's memory but through outlasting it. Family gatherings brought their own challenges. William and Harry maintained polite distance, never quite warming to their father's second wife. Camilla didn't push, didn't try to replace their mother or force affection. She remained courteous and respectful, giving them space while making it clear she wasn't going anywhere. It was another form of patience, another calculated move in a game she was determined to win. "I've waited this long," Camilla told her reflection one morning as she prepared for another public appearance. "I can wait until they see me not as the woman who came after Diana, but as the woman who stood beside Charles through everything." She straightened her pearls, lifted her chin, and walked out to face the cameras with the quiet confidence of someone who knew that time, ultimately, was on her side. The crown she had waited decades for was within reach, and nothing would make her let go now. The diary and secret plans. The discovery happened quite by accident on a gray October afternoon in 2023. A young archivist named Eleanor Mills had been cataloging documents at Camilla's private estate when she noticed a loose panel in the antique writing desk. Behind it lay a collection of leather-bound journals, their pages filled with elegant handwriting that spanned nearly 3 decades. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened the first volume, not knowing she had stumbled upon secrets that could shake the monarchy to its foundation. "I despise her," read an entry from 1993, the words sharp and venomous on the yellowed page. Diana plays the victim so brilliantly, wrapping the world around her finger with those doe eyes and calculated tears. Everyone sees her as this fragile creature. But I know better. She's as manipulative as they come, using her beauty and her suffering as weapons against me. The hatred practically burned through the paper, so different from Camilla's carefully controlled public image. Eleanor continued reading, her shock deepening with each page. Entry after entry revealed a woman consumed by bitterness and ambition. Camilla wrote extensively about Diana, cataloging every perceived slight and every moment when the princess's popularity made her own position more precarious. The journals painted Diana not as a rival, but as an obstacle to be removed, a barrier standing between Camilla and her rightful place in history. "Sometimes I wonder if Charles is even worth this torture," Camilla had written in 1996. "He's weak, indecisive, and completely unable to stand up to his family or the public. He loves me, yes, but his love comes with so much baggage and cowardice. If it weren't for the crown, for what being his wife could mean for my legacy, I might have walked away years ago." The words struck like a physical blow. This was not the devoted partner the public had reluctantly come to accept. The most disturbing revelations appeared in journals dated after Diana's death. While the world mourned, Camilla had been planning. She wrote detailed strategies for rehabilitating her image, step-by-step instructions for slowly winning public acceptance. Every charity appearance, every carefully chosen outfit, every measured statement to the press had been calculated moves in a larger game. Nothing had been spontaneous or genuine. Everything had been theater. "The boys are the key," read an entry from 2001. "William especially. If I can get him to tolerate me, eventually accept me, the public will follow. I must be patient with them, never pushy, always respectful of their mother's memory." but inside I'll be working to ensure my own bloodline gains prominence in the family tree. Eleanor felt sick reading these cold calculations about two grieving teenagers, but the most shocking passages dealt with Camilla's long-term vision for the monarchy itself. She had written extensively about her granddaughter Lola, born in 2007, and how she might be positioned closer to the throne through strategic marriage. The journals outlined a plan so audacious it seemed like fiction, engineering a relationship between Lola and Prince George, William's eldest son and future king. "If Lola marries George, my blood will flow through future monarchs," Camilla wrote in 2015. "The Parker Bowles name will be woven into the fabric of royalty forever. Diana's sons will produce my great-grandchildren. The irony is delicious. I will have won completely, erasing her legacy with my own." The cold calculation in those words was breathtaking. This was not love or family loyalty. This was dynasty building at its most ruthless. Eleanor discovered entries detailing how Camilla had already begun implementing her plan. She wrote about arranging casual meetings between the children at family gatherings, planting seeds of friendship that might bloom into something more significant years later. She documented conversations with Charles about the importance of their grandchildren knowing each other well, framing it as family unity while hiding her true intentions. "People think I'm harmless now," an entry from 2018 declared. "They see me as the grandmother, the dutiful wife who finally earned her place. They have no idea what I'm truly capable of or what I'm building in the shadows. By the time anyone realizes what I've done, it will be too late to stop it." The arrogance in those words was staggering. The journals also revealed Camilla's views on other family members she considered obstacles. She wrote dismissively about Catherine, William's wife, calling her too perfect, too polished, too obviously managed by palace handlers. She expressed frustration with Harry and Meghan, not because of their departure from royal duties, but because their drama diverted attention from her own carefully crafted narrative. "When Charles becomes king, everything changes," Camilla had written repeatedly across multiple journals. "I won't be the Duchess of Cornwall anymore, tolerated but not loved. I'll be queen, whether they use the title or not. I'll have real power then, real influence over decisions that matter, and I'll use every bit of it to secure my family's future in this institution." The raw ambition was undeniable. Eleanor found detailed notes about eliminating potential threats to Camilla's position. While there was nothing explicitly criminal, the language was disturbing. Camilla wrote about neutralizing certain courtiers who opposed her, about removing advisors who favored other family members, about clearing the path for her own ascension. The words could be interpreted as political maneuvering, but the tone suggested something darker. "I've sacrificed too much to settle for being a footnote in history," read one of the final entries Eleanor discovered. "I've endured hatred, humiliation, and decades of waiting. Now it's my turn. Diana had her moment in the sun, but the sun sets on everyone eventually. My reign is just beginning, and I'll make sure it lasts long after I'm gone through the children I've positioned so carefully. This is my revenge, my triumph, my legacy." Eleanor closed the journal with shaking hands, understanding she held evidence of a conspiracy that could destroy the monarchy's carefully maintained facade. The question was what to do with this devastating knowledge. But how did William react when he discovered Camilla's plans? The confrontation prince. William stepped out of his car on a cold November morning, the gravel crunching beneath his polished shoes. He had driven to the estate himself, dismissing his usual driver for this particular visit. Something about the urgent call from the archivist had unsettled him deeply. The old manor house loomed before him, its windows dark and unwelcoming despite the early afternoon light. He walked through the entrance hall, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Eleanor Mills waited in the library, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She had barely slept in the 4 days since discovering the journals, torn between loyalty to her employer and loyalty to truth. When William entered, she stood quickly, offering a small curtsy. Her face was drawn and pale, making her look years older than her 28 years. She gestured toward the reading table where several leather-bound volumes lay open. "I found these behind a panel in the desk," Eleanor said quietly. "I think you should read them yourself." William approached the table slowly, sensing that whatever lay in those pages would fundamentally change something. He picked up the first journal, noting the date scrawled on the inside cover, 1992. His eyes moved across the handwriting, elegant and controlled, as Camilla's voice from the past spoke directly to him. The words hit him like physical blows. Hatred for his mother poured from every sentence, cold calculations about his father, strategic plans spanning decades. His hands trembled slightly as he turned page after page. Here was Camilla's true voice, stripped of the careful politeness she showed the world. She wrote about Diana with venom that made his stomach turn. She described Charles with contempt disguised as affection. Most disturbing were the entries about himself and his brother, reducing them to chess pieces in her elaborate game. William read about her plans for Prince George, for engineering connections between her grandchildren and his own children. "Bring her here immediately," William said, his voice barely controlled. 2 hours later, Camilla walked into the library with her usual measured stride. She wore a simple cashmere sweater and pearls, looking every bit the respectable duchess. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the open journals, Eleanor's nervous presence, and William's rigid posture. Her expression revealed nothing, no surprise or fear, just a calm assessment of the situation before her. "Sit down," William commanded. "I prefer to stand." The defiance in those 4 words ignited William's carefully restrained fury. He held up one of the journals, his voice shaking with emotion as he spoke. He quoted passages about his mother, about the celebration Camilla felt when Diana passed away, about the decades of manipulation and scheming. He demanded explanations, apologies, some sign of human decency or remorse. Camilla listened without interruption, her face a mask of composure. When William finally stopped, breathing hard from the force of his anger, she met his gaze directly. Her voice when she spoke was steady and utterly unapologetic. She confirmed every word in those journals was true. She offered no excuses or explanations, no tears or pleas for understanding. The audacity of her honesty shocked William more than any lie could have. "You actually believe you've done nothing wrong," William said, disbelief coloring his tone. "I believe I've done what was necessary." Those 6 words contained such cold certainty that William felt something shift in how he understood his stepmother. This was not a woman capable of shame or guilt. This was someone who viewed the world as a battlefield where only the strategic survived. He thought of his children, of George especially, and rage flooded through him again. Camilla had been planning to use his son as a tool for her own dynastic ambitions. "You need to leave this family," William stated flatly. "I don't think so." The quiet confidence in Camilla's response made William pause. She was not begging or bargaining. She was stating a fact, as though she held cards he had not yet seen. The two stood facing each other across the library, separated by open journals and decades of hidden resentment. Finally, William turned and walked out, unable to trust himself to remain in her presence any longer. Camilla waited until his car disappeared down the drive before making a phone call. Sir Marcus Weatherby arrived as darkness fell, his silver Mercedes pulling up to the side entrance. He was a man of 65 with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind, someone who had spent his career navigating the dangerous waters of power and politics. Camilla poured whiskey for them both, settling into her favorite chair. "William discovered everything," she said simply. Marcus sipped his drink, thinking carefully before responding. He had advised Camilla for 16 years, helping her transform from the most hated woman in Britain to an accepted member of the royal family. This was undoubtedly their greatest challenge yet. He asked what William had said, what threats he had made, what leverage he might possess. "He wants me gone," Camilla replied, "but he won't act rashly. He's too concerned about protecting the institution." She paused, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "William thinks he holds all the power here because he's discovered my secrets. He doesn't realize I've been preparing for this possibility for years." She walked to her desk and unlocked a drawer, removing a thick folder. Inside were documents, photographs, recorded conversations, and detailed notes about various family members. Insurance policies, she called them, collected systematically over 2 decades. Information that certain people would desperately want kept private. evidence of indiscretions, financial irregularities, and compromising situations. If William tries to force me out publicly, these become public too, Camilla stated. Mutually assured destruction. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the brutal logic. Camilla had learned the most important lesson of survival in powerful institutions. Make yourself impossible to remove without catastrophic consequences. She had spent years gathering ammunition, building defenses, creating situations where attacking her would damage the attacker just as severely. William might hate her, might want her gone, but he would have to weigh that desire against the cost. Despite the warnings, Camilla wasn't planning to let go of her dreams. Plans for ascension and royal manipulation. Camilla sat in her private study 3 days after William's discovery, surrounded by carefully organized files and handwritten notes. She had spent 72 hours planning her next moves with the precision of a military strategist. The coronation was scheduled for May 6, 2023, just 6 months away. Charles would become king, and she would stand beside him as queen consort, regardless of what William or anyone else wanted. That ceremony represented her ultimate vindication, the moment when all her patience and suffering would be rewarded. Her first priority was securing the queen title without qualification or diminishment. Palace advisors had suggested she might use princess consort instead, a compromise to appease those who still mourned Diana. Camilla rejected this idea completely. She instructed her legal team to research every precedent, every historical example of consorts who had claimed full queenship. She met with constitutional experts, religious leaders, and influential politicians, building a coalition of support that would make denying her the title politically impossible. Charles proved easier to manage than she had anticipated. He was exhausted from decades of waiting for the crown, overwhelmed by the responsibilities suddenly thrust upon him, and increasingly dependent on Camilla's guidance. She positioned herself as his most trusted advisor, the only person who truly understood the burdens he carried. Late at night, when his confidence wavered, she whispered reassurances and shaped his thinking toward her preferred outcomes. She controlled access to him, deciding which advisors he heard from and which concerns reached his attention. "You're the king now," she reminded him constantly. "You make the final decisions, not the courtiers who've been running things for your mother." This message appealed to Charles's long-suppressed desire for autonomy and authority. Camilla encouraged him to assert himself, to break from tradition when it suited their purposes, to trust his own judgment above the institutional voices that had constrained him for 7 decades. She was creating a king who would rely on her rather than the established support systems. Simultaneously, Camilla began a subtle campaign to undermine William's position as heir. She never criticized him directly or obviously, knowing that would backfire. Instead, she planted small seeds of doubt about his readiness and temperament. She mentioned to Charles how stressed William seemed, how the younger generation lacked patience with royal protocol, how modern attitudes might destabilize the monarchy. She suggested that William needed more guidance and supervision, more oversight of his activities and public statements. Her strategy with senior officials was more complex. Lord Pemberton, the king's private secretary, opposed her ambitions openly. He represented the old guard, those who believed the monarchy's survival depended on maintaining traditional boundaries and respecting public sentiment. Camilla met with him privately, appearing to seek his counsel while actually cataloging his weaknesses. She discovered his concerns about budget overruns and began positioning herself as a voice for fiscal responsibility, gaining allies among those who controlled funding. The Archbishop of Canterbury presented another obstacle. He had moral reservations about crowning a divorced woman whose affair had contributed to the breakdown of the previous heir's marriage. Camilla approached this challenge differently, emphasizing her charitable work and religious faith. She attended services more frequently, made generous donations to church restoration projects, and cultivated relationships with progressive clergy who supported her inclusion. She framed opposition to her coronation as outdated thinking that contradicted Christian values of forgiveness and redemption. Her most audacious move involved slowly integrating her own family into official royal functions. Her son Tom began appearing at ceremonial events, sitting in positions of prominence usually reserved for working royals. Her daughter Laura received invitations to state dinners and formal receptions. Camilla ensured photographers captured these moments, normalizing her family's presence in spaces they had never occupied before. She was rewriting the visual language of the monarchy, expanding the definition of who belonged in the inner circle. Behind closed doors, Camilla worked to place her trusted allies in key positions throughout the royal household. She recommended candidates for important roles, always people who owed their advancement to her patronage. She created networks of loyalty that bypassed traditional reporting structures. Information flowed to her first, allowing her to shape narratives before they reached Charles or other family members. She was building an infrastructure of power that would survive any individual opposition. The resistance grew as Camilla's plans became clear. Officials pushed back, some requested transfers or early retirement, and whispers spread of her overreach and manipulation. Yet she remained unmoved, hardened by decades of struggle and public scorn. Each challenge only strengthened her resolve. She knew time favored the steadfast. Opponents would tire, leave, or be reassigned. Through patience and cunning, she would endure, standing closer to the throne than anyone expected, ready to claim the power she believed was hers. Charles's response and punishment. Charles had always known that Camilla was ambitious, but the full extent of her plans struck him with a force he had not expected. The documents, the diaries, and the secret arrangements she had made revealed a mind working far beyond ordinary cunning. She had not only positioned herself for influence, but had plotted moves that could undermine everything he had worked for. The realization settled over him like a cold shadow, and he understood that this was no simple betrayal. Every decision she had quietly made over the years had been part of a calculated design to seize power. He chose to confront her in the privacy of a room where no one else could interfere. The atmosphere was heavy, the kind of quiet that amplifies every heartbeat and thought. There was no need for raised voices. Charles' approach was measured, deliberate, and precise. He presented what he had learned, each word carrying the weight of authority and warning. His punishment was not loud or chaotic. It was carefully designed to strike where it would hurt most, to remind Camilla that even the most secretive and well-laid plans could crumble under scrutiny. Camilla met him with a calm that had always hidden her true intentions, but beneath the surface, fear began to creep in. She felt a vulnerability that she had rarely experienced. The reality of her situation forced her to lower her defenses and seek mercy, an act that revealed a side of her no one had ever seen. Her usual confidence, her composed exterior, faltered under the steady weight of Charles's calculated response. For the first time, she confronted the limits of her control and realized that ambition alone could not shield her from consequences. Even after the confrontation, the tension did not dissipate. The punishment had been carried out, yet the deeper battle between them remained unresolved. Charles had asserted his authority, but Camilla's desire and drive had not disappeared. Their struggle had entered a new phase, one defined by quiet observation, strategic maneuvering, and unspoken challenges. Every interaction, every glance, now carried an undercurrent of suspicion and calculation. The palace itself seemed to hum with the latent conflict, a reminder that power was never fully settled, and that ambition and authority were constantly in tension. The encounter left both of them altered in subtle ways. Charles had demonstrated the reach of his influence and the consequences of defiance, while Camilla had been reminded of the fragility of her position. Yet neither was defeated. The confrontation was a momentary clash in a longer, ongoing struggle, one that promised future confrontations and the continued play of hidden agendas. The outcome of their rivalry remained uncertain, and the silent war between them would continue to shape their world. Every move they made thereafter would carry echoes of this encounter, leaving the future uncertain and the stakes higher than ever.